Fala galera, eu sou Igor Miranda e o papo agora é com VILLE VALO. O ex-vocalista do Rima acabou de lançar um álbum solo, o Neo Noir, disponibilizado aí por meio do projeto VIVE, ou em bom português, VV. Quando a gente conversou, o VILLE tinha acabado de fazer os primeiros shows do projeto, ele está super animado, super empolgado e super falante também, o que é ótimo. A gente conversou bastante sobre esse novo disco, sobre Rima, sobre o fim do Rima, sobre a relação dele com o Brasil, sobre a clássica Join Me in Death, entre outros assuntos aí. Se liga!
How are you doing, VILLE?
I'm all right. Thanks for asking. Yeah, it's an exciting time now. The album's come out, and after all that. Huh?
Sorry, I just interrupted you.
No, well, it's the latency. We can't avoid that these days with communication. That delay, it's always a bit funny. But no, everything's going great. And I was just talking just before we started this, just talking about the fact that it feels very surreal because I've been working on the album for quite a long time, and most of it by myself at my home. And now, after all this time, now it's actually in the stores. It's actually available, and it's also a physical thing. I always considered the LP, the gatefold vinyl, to be that's the full experience, and not dissing streams or CDs, but it's the size of the vinyl, and it's like books. You know, I do understand the Kindle thing, but I still love books. I like how they smell, and I like how the pages curl up when I read them in my bathtub. You know.
Yeah, I totally understand you because I have my CD and vinyl collection right here.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about how does it feel to release the album right now, because it took so long, and you probably seen some reactions on social networks. I don't know, but you just did a concert on last Friday. So how has it been so far since the release of the album?
We played Saturday and Sunday as well, so it was 3 shows back to back, and they were in Helsinki, in our hometown, sort of legendary club, where we actually played the last gig of him with. So it was great to be back, and the gig was great. It was surprisingly well-oiled, the machine, which because it's the first solo thing I've ever done. It's completely a new band, and I haven't toured with those guys before. And also there's a new technical crew. So the guy with whom I designed the lights with, and everything visual that's going on, it's all new to me. So after all those years of doing that, we did that with largely the same crew as well, with him for 25 years. So a lot of firsts on this one. It went great. There was audiences all around the world. There was in the front row, there was people from Chile, and people from, I think, Norway and UK and Scotland, and all over the place. Anyway, but it was and Ukraine as well. There was people from Kiev who were able to come over, which is quite something during these weird times. But yeah, let's say, I would say that it went as well as it could. It was a great start for the whole thing and a great experience. And it was nice seeing how on the first gig, which was the day of the release of the album, that people didn't know the lyrics of the new song so well. But then as the days we kept on going forward, then they started singing along a bit more heartfully. And yeah, it's a great start, and I'm not big on reading comments on social media because, as you know, they're usually really for or really against, and there's not a lot of constructive middle ground criticism to be found on social media. So I'm not. It just makes my head spin. So I'd rather skip that stuff. And there's been some reviews on magazines and hearing stuff from friends as well. It's been very positive. I'm really surprised because you can never tell. And the kind of racket I make is not the latest fad. You know, it's not the coolest whatever. You know, it's not the latest tricks in the book or whatever. However you want to put it. So, but I guess this, you know, I'm a zebra that can't like all zebras, I can't, change my stripes. So I have this musical identity, and I've been working on it since the 90s. So it's who I am, take it or leave it. And I'm glad that there's some takers.
Amazing. Well, about the concert, you mixed new songs with hymn songs. So the old fans cannot complain, of course, but what was the method to work on the set list? What did you consider when choosing both new and old songs?
I thought that was pretty easy in a way that from the very beginning, I thought that it's important to play hymn songs. A lot of the hymn songs are songs written by me, and I do understand that, they're mine and they're important to me for personal reasons as well. And I thought that since I'm not trying to do a full departure, do something completely different, then at times when artists, when a band breaks up, they want to do something completely, do a 180 and do something, change the genre of music and all that, which is understandable at times. But I wanted to logically continue where we left off and sort of like bring my own flourishes and ideas to it. So from the very beginning, it sounded best to me that we zigzag in between the old and the new. And from the old, there are sort of songs you cannot leave unplayed. So it was quite easy. It was like what do you call it? What's the word? Whatever. No, my brain's not working today. But anyway, there were songs like Rip Out the Wings of a Butterfly, Buried Alive by Love, Right Here in My Arms, Join Me in Death, The Funeral of Hearts. A few songs that have been very important for him and have been very important for the people who love him as well. So it was easy, kind of like just to play the best songs, with the old stuff, with the new stuff. Sorry. So just made all the sense in the world to me. It wasn't too hard. It was actually pretty easy to make it all flow nice and neat. And it's quite of a roller coaster ride as well, tempo wise and feel wise. I think that's important too. And then the sets is not too long, so it's only a bit over an hour. But then the encore is a bit longer, because as these days, as you usually know, there's always an encore. Back in the day when it started out, it was like if you made something, it was if the performance was out of this world, people would have clapped their hands so long that the artist had to come back. But these days, it's part of the course. It's like an interim. It's like a middle break. You should have the bell in there, like, please go on and use the lavatories, and there's going to be bling. The second act will be second. So, but yeah, it's I thought it worked out really well, and of course we'll be honing in on it during touring and switching perhaps songs around. But I think, and also depending regarding the new stuff, also depending how people are gonna find the album. If there's gonna be some certain songs that we feel that need more attention, then we're gonna massage this stuff around. And there was 2 songs we didn't play from the new album called Vertigo Eyes, and the other one being Baby Like Remarrying. But we have rehearsed both of those, so we can make it move a bit differently. But once again, you have to start somewhere, and I thought that the big deal was actually to be able to pull off the set in a way that it wouldn't be boring, even for the people who don't necessarily love the new stuff, or the people who only love the new stuff and can't stand the old one. So that it moves fastly enough. And it makes sense, and the sense of dynamic and the change of mood between.
Yeah, and I have to say that good to know about Vertigo Eyes. It's one of my favorite songs from the album.
Oh, yeah. This time around, we ended the set with or the encore. The last song of the evening was Saturnine Saturnalia, and Saturnine and then Vertigo Eyes. They're pretty close to each other feel wise. They're like big end songs. They have big riffs and outros and stuff. So I feel that you can't have both in the same set. So that's the stuff we might be switching around or trying to create some sort of Frankenstein monster out of those later on. But yeah, Vertigo Eyes is cool. It's quite psychedelic and quite sort of all over the place.
Yeah. Well, not talking about the album itself, you described neo-noir before, and I have to quote you because it's amazing. You described as the Mamas and the Papas dressed up as Metallica on their way to a Halloween bash at the Studio 54. That's an amazing description, I must tell you. But I'd say there are more guests to this party, like Black Sabbath, Depeche Mode, him, of course, as there are nods to your past work. What other influences would you say that guided your creative work on this album?
Well, I think if you haven't heard the album, but you are a movie buff, I think a good way of describing the album is a Finnish goth's desperate attempt to create Blade Runner in music, because I think that it has a lot to do with Blade Runner. The mixing of genres. I love Blade Runner, the movie. The neon noir, the whole title of the album sounds very Blade Runner-ish in a way. It is that, once again, the juxtaposition of the light and the dark, and sort of like the shining darkness, the neon coming together with the old school noir that can be interpreted as film noir or Scandi noir or just plain old noir. So and everything in between. So it's depending on with whom you would try to explain the album to, because it's depending on the vocabulary or the sort of like your own collection of albums. It's tough to say, so I'm usually pretty good at communicating like that, but and I wanted it to be it's a dark and melancholy album, but I wanted it to feel like a warm hug. So I didn't want the album to sound abrasive or aggressive in a way that would that would sound violent in any way. The sort of like the anguish and the aggression or the violence in the album's inner violence is the crying out of the heart more than going all Braveheart,
Yeah. Well, you also said in some interviews that this is a bridge between him and the future. Putting it that way, can we look at this album as a transitional work, maybe?
Yeah, sure. Because I'm learning my way around with this new family and this new situation and the setup. It's, of course, it's very weird for me personally, because we were together with him. We were for around 25 years, and I knew some of the guys from way before. So we literally grew up together. So it was not just about music and just about the band. When it came to him, it was about life in general and growing up and experiencing all those highs and lows together. It's a big deal. And with this one, it's I'm taking baby steps. And once again, I didn't want to denounce my past. I wanted to embrace all of that, because I think it's an important part of who I am. So in that sense, it is a transitional point. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going somewhere. I think that's important as well, to keep on the be on the move, and to rather than stay put. So, but where it'll take me, that I'm hoping that that'll be a surprise for myself as well, because that will keep myself on my toes and make it challenging and surprising. And that's, I think, what more or less everybody wants from life. That doesn't repeat the same thing. It's not like Groundhog's Day.
Yeah. Well, and now a tough question maybe. Well, it's been 10 years, a decade since him's last album, Tears on Tape. Since then, you did a lot of concerts with him, of course. You reunited with the agents. You probably many things happened in your personal life. My question is, what has changed in you over this decade, either as a person or as a musician, since Tears on Tape?
There's been so many things, to be honest with you. That's a long time. That's an excellent question. We're just trying to separate all those things, because, as you said, a lot of stuff is personal, but the personal affects the music as well. Of course it does, because music is personal. So I think, probably the biggest change and the biggest thing for me was because I wasn't able to imagine life without him. And I was scared of what would happen and how it would feel after the band was done, but we still felt that that was the only way to go. So I was really positively surprised when after a day after the last concert we ever played, that I felt exactly the same as before. Nothing had changed, and I felt a sense of relief that we had done. We had sort of packed our bags with dignity regarding him, and went off to greener pastures. So I think that was a big deal. And then I think I'm a bit more zen, a bit more patient these days. But I would like not to be. But that's my personality. Personality is always like, I want everything now and yesterday, and it needs to be done. Nobody else understands me, and blah blah blah. But I guess that's part and parcel that comes with the job, and the enthusiasm I have for music. So I've been trying to tone that down a bit so I can work with other people too when required. But yeah, but those are not so much changes, but I think it's more about learning new things about yourself and hopefully evolving one way or the other rather than devolving. So I'm creating Neo Noir was a big deal. I haven't really recorded anything, and I played all the stuff on it. I played all the drums, and I purchased the drum set and learned how to mic it up and all that stuff. And it was a huge challenge to take, but that's what we're here for, to do crazy things and shoot for the stars. I think that's a cool thing. And after all this time to actually have the album done, so it all sort of paid off. Here's the proof that I actually made it happen. So that's a cool thing, and that's a I wouldn't necessarily call it achievement, but that's a new vibe. completely a new vibe.
Absolutely. Well, since I mentioned before the work with the agents, do you believe that recording and touring with the agents made you maybe more comfortable working with these kinds of gentler melodies that we hear in Neo Noir?
Oh yeah, definitely. And then the head honcho, the main guy from Agents, Esa, the guitar player who also produces all of their albums. He's quite a well-known producer here. He gave me the courage to produce and record by myself. He made it look so not easy, but he made it look like something that you do, as opposed to something that is like black magic that nobody knows to do. You have to be 20 million gold album seller, to be able to know anything about it, and that there's a lot of tricks in the book that you have to study for years and years and years to be able to pull anything off. I think that the attitude I learned from Esa was that if you have a mic, you put it in front of the instrument and you record it. If it sounds like poop, then you move the mic or you change the instrument or do something about it. But it's not rocket science at the end of the day. And indeed, touring, especially touring with the agents, was that I was on the stage for the first time without that big, distorted, fuzzy wall of guitars and bass. So the dynamic was very, very different. And I think that you always try to learn from the ones that know their crafts. And Esa is one of the best. They do everything proper analog, everything's on tape.
And was it intentional maybe to make this album sound not so heavy while comparing to him? Was it planned?
Not so much. I think once again that has to do with the warm hug thing. I do love heavy music myself, but I love weird heavy music a lot. Like I don't know how to pronounce it, but, the solo project of Justin Broderick from Godflesh. It's called Jesu or Yesu. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I love weird music. That music is very heavy, but it's very melodic and very haunting. And I think in him, maybe Linda, the guitar player, and perhaps Gas, the drummer, they were proper metalheads. So it informed the whole sound a bit more too. There's not a lot of Metallica on Neo Noir, not a lot of that sort of full-blown metal, but there's quite a bit of Black Sabbath, and there's quite a bit of Queens of Stone Age, and then there's quite a bit of these sort of 80s new wavy guitar influences plus shoegaze stuff. So I love all that, like Jesus and the Mary Chain and Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, and newer stuff as well, like Death Heaven, for example. The album, the Infinite Granite, that came out during the pandemic, and I was listening to that album a lot, and I thought that it's a great album because it's very unique. It sounds like something that nobody's done before, and I think as a musician, you always would like to be a part of a thing like that. So that was an inspiration, and I've always been a huge fan of the sort of indie guitar stuff as well, Dinosaur Jr. and Smashing Pumpkins, and big and messy guitars, but more of that wall of sound stuff rather than more. I'm a bigger fan of Billy Corgan than Dave Mustaine, not as personalities. I don't know that, so interesting characters, but that sort of, so there's a bit less of that 80s metal influence, but maybe that we had with him, and it wasn't conscious, but since I worked on Neo Noir solely by myself, that is what sounded good to me. That is how I felt the songs are represented the best, and because of that, I hadn't really thought about it. When you're in a band, you actually talk about those things. You're like, should we have more fuzzy guitars on this album, or should we heard this on this album? Should we get this thing going? But since I was working by myself, I was kind of like following the song and seeing where it can take me, and also didn't want the because it easily happens with rock bands. It's like you want to sound the biggest and the baddest and the sort of noisiest, and I didn't want that sort of macho, who's bigger and better sort of comparison thing going on with this album. I just wanted to follow the songs and see where they can take me, and maybe more or less create a mood. It's quite an atmospheric album, even though it's a rock album, but it's quite cinematic at times, which to me is important. But it's kind of like that, Twin Peaks goth rock sort of, with a dash of Black Sabbath, in the proceedings.
Yes. I have to ask you about Brazil, otherwise Brazilian fans would kill me.
Sure.
Well, you played here only twice, in 2014 and 2015. First of all, what memories do you have from Brazil, Brazilian fans being in Brazil?
I remember because Wayne Hussey of The Mission, he's lived in Brazil for a long time, so it was lovely seeing him. I hadn't seen him in many years, and I seen him in Europe. We played together with The Mission in Europe, like early 2000s. So it was a cool reunion, and he's always been telling me about the country because he loves it. And then I think that the Finnish director Kaurismäki, who's very well known here, he used to live in Brazil as well. So I've heard about the country quite a bit before, and then also all the Sepultura stuff and all that, and from way back when. And they used to listen to Finnish, all like hardcore, Terveet Kädet and bands like that. So there's always been this weird rapport between Brazil and Finland for whatever reason. I think we both might be crazy. That might be the reason, but crazy in the same way. But I remember driving into the cities because we played Sao Paulo and we played Rio. I think those were the two ones, because it was a haze. It's a lot of traveling
Yes.
over there. And then I remember Sao Paulo. It was beautiful to drive because it reminded me of the Sepultura videos and stuff. I'd never seen anything like that. Some of the wall art, the graffiti, and all that stuff. And in Rio, we were staying at a hotel in Copacabana, so we saw the ocean, and it was more like a touristy sort of thing. And I remember Miguel, bass player, he went for a swim, and all the fans took pictures of him. And they were funny because Miguel is a big guy, so he was like big Finnish whale that came out of the water, and it's all pissed off that he wasn't left in peace. So yeah, I remember the drives, but at least to my knowledge, we didn't have the time to really do anything, which usually is the case on tours. So you fly in maybe the day before, on the same day of the gig. You fly to the next city, and then especially in that area of the world, traveling is not as quick. The distances are very long, and with the customs, with traveling with amplifiers and music stuff, it always takes some time. So, but I would love to come back, and we're actually working on all that to happen. Hopefully, with this Neo Noir album, that we'd be able to to fly over later on in the year, or hopefully early next year. I'm hoping because, yeah, maybe for egotistical reasons as well. It would be a great place to visit once again, and maybe this time around to see a bit more of it. But I'm not complaining. Also, the cool thing about touring is also that you usually get to see places from the perspective of the locals, because you're always traveling. You always travel in through the back door, so to speak. You're not a tourist per se, because you're the performer, and you usually get to meet the locals that really know the area and all that. So it's cool that with each and every trip you learn a bit more about the place, and you can sort of like expand your territory a bit, like a dog, you know, pissing around in a larger circle every time you visit a country or a city. So yeah, that'd be great. And much love to everybody there. So, you know, it's great that there's still people into this kind of racket, and I'm hoping that I can keep on doing this, and that's not something I can decide. That is something that the listeners and all of the world can make that call. You know, so I'm humbled and honored about the possibility of doing so.
It's good to know that you're already planning coming back to Brazil. And I have a last question here, going more into the past, because next year it will be 25 years since he released Join Me in That as a single, of course, considering it was released as a promotional track before the Razor Blade Romance album. It's a huge song, one of your most popular songs. It's among the top 10 best-selling singles of all time in Finland, if I'm not mistaken. So what memories do you have from rewriting and recording this track?
I remember it was after the first album, I had some publishing money, my first publishing money, and I bought a big keyboard, because the first hymn album I'd written on a bass guitar. I didn't have a guitar, I didn't have anything. So I wrote all the riffs on 4 strings, and because I used to be a bass player, and that was my first instrument. And I remember I put some money into having this beautiful Korg like workstation, which was the coolest thing on the block then. And it had a sequencer, and I'd never used a sequencer before. And Join Me, that piano thing was one of the first things I came up, because I'm not a piano player, so I had to look for the notes, and it took me ages to sort of like figure out the right mood and mode and tempo, and I remember playing it to the rest of the guys in the band, and everybody thought that it's way too poppy. And it took a while. We demoed it several times, and then I remember, because that was at that time people still didn't have, there was no social media, and there was no camera phones. So actually bands were able to play new tracks live and test how they'd go down with the audiences. And we played on quite a few festivals in Europe. We played Join Me in That during that time, and there was already people singing it along. So only after hearing it on a couple of festivals. So we thought that's a great track. And but obviously you never know with a song where it might go. Because as a band or as a songwriter, you always love all the songs. Everything is important. And it has to be. It wouldn't make any sense to wake up in the morning and say that now I'm going to write one great song and 3 shitty ones. So it was a weird thing also, because it was the German label back in '99. They asked whether we have any music ready, because there's a chance to have the song on a film in Germany. And Join Me in Death was the first songs we had ready, and they said, no, it's not a good song, but we'll try it out. And then it was cool, because the record company, they were like, oh, it doesn't sound too good. It's not a hit song. It definitely isn't a hit song. And all of a sudden, the same guys, after it went to #1, they're like, yeah, we always knew that it's going to be a hit song. Great, fantastic. That's how it always goes. But it's and then I remember when it went to #1, I think it was late in '99 or very early in 2000. It went to #1 in Germany, which was a huge deal for a Finnish band to be internationally successful at that time. And I remember there was me and Miguel, the bass player, in him. We were sitting down at a bar. We got a phone call from our label rep in Germany saying that that's #1, that, you know, congratulations, and they were clinking their champagne bottles or whatever. And me and Miguel, we had just enough money to buy a single pint of beer, which we could share. So we weren't able to clink it. We were able to just have a sip and, you know, congratulate each other like that. So that was a transitional point. That song changed the career of him, because it became this big crossover hit. It was played in discos, and it was played in rock clubs, and it really changed how we were perceived. We were a metal band originally, and all of a sudden we were on the cover of very poppy sort of teenager magazines, which was funny and weird. And it didn't last for a long time, but it still helped us to open up some new doors and get the attention of people who wouldn't normally be interested in that kind of music. So it's a big deal back then.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience. Hope to see you here in Brazil soon.
Yeah. Well, likewise. Thank you. Thanks for having me, and all the best to you and yours. And we'll keep you informed as soon as we know something about an upcoming tour over there.
Looking forward to it. Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. Take it easy.